Welcome to another edition of Coach's Corner, an ESPN Esports Call of Duty League program. This is where we pick a different coach around the league and pick their brain on what it takes to be a coach and talk about their coaching strategies and how things are going for them in Call of Duty League. We are, full disclosure, actually recording this immediately after the events of the weekend that just occurred. The Dallas Empire home series has yet to conclude. However, the Dallas Empire just concluded their weekend, and joining us fresh off of the tournament is Rambo Ray, who is the head coach of the Dallas Empire. First of all, minutes after the last matchup for the team, you're joining us here, so we really appreciate your time, Ray.
Yeah, no, it's a little sad right now. I'm sorry if I'm a little negative on what I'm saying or exactly, but yeah, no, I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
So let's jump into this weekend. I mean, it seemed like things were going strong for Dallas. There was some against the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Let's start with that series, because that last play by Illy was absolutely incredible. I want you to give me your perspective on how Illy was able to pull that off and win the series on hardpoint. That was incredible.
Yeah, we've actually been through a lot of these situations since the start of the year. We've had we've been on the wrong side of it enough now to where we know what to expect and what not to do. I guess it's trial by error. So a lot of the players, especially the young guys, have kind of reached an understanding of how to react to those situations in a way that can put us on top instead of making us lose. So the plays and the understanding of what's happening at specific times when the game's on crunch time like that is, we've made it progress like beyond belief, really. So I'm really happy to see players kind of come to those situations. Ideally, we don't have to be in that situation and just win a game cleanly and not kind of rely on last-minute plays. But yeah, no, it was an exciting play to watch, and it grows our confidence each time we're in that situation when we come out on top.
And is there any pride from you, the fact that it was Illy, one of the newcomers to the scene in general, that was able to pull off a play like that?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, the young guys have been making some incredible progress. I'd say like 2 or 3 weeks before the LA event, I started kind of working with the team more post LA. I had a little involvement for LA, but I was still watching and keeping up what was going on. And you could tell the young guys are kind of reaching their stride. They're really kind of being active with the older guys. Crim and Clay are being very adamantly kind of teaching them things and making sure they understand what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. And they're being praised and also being kind of crapped on a little bit, for lack of a better word, when they do things that aren't right. So it's been a good dynamic, and it's kind of coming to fruition now where we understand what we should be doing in a lot of situations that we didn't before, and it's kind of showing.
I said hard point in error. It was actually a Hackney Yard domination play by Illy to secure the final play there. It was very impressive. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch that game against the Guerrillas from the Dallas Empire. From there, it was a tight game 5 against the Toronto Ultra, a team that not many people have been talking about throughout the season in terms of being a competitive team. When you look back on that series, are you surprised that it went that far?
Not at all. So Toronto is the only team in the league to have 10 people on their roster. And unlike other teams, when they've reached for subs, they've actually went for players on their roster. The inclusion of medals and a couple of role switching in the last couple of weeks, to me, has made them a much improved team. Their coach, Marky B, I can't say good enough things about him and how he handled things. He understands the game, and he's very good at projecting his kind of, I guess, his 2 cents to his players, and they seem to have a good dynamic where they listen and they have good back and forths. But the progress they made has been extraordinary, in my opinion. I would almost rate him as like a let's say top 8 for sure, but I think maybe even top 16 kind of moving forward with this online process of the league. It's really based on, I don't want to be too negative. Again, I'm going to try and hold some things back, but the league has done what they could to make the games as fair as possible since this is the first time kind of coming online. But there's some unfairness, and it's showing as you're going to see a lot of teams that you probably wouldn't see compete at the highest level before kind of come out and have a chance to win tournaments. And you're going to see a lot of, like, for the start of the year, it's been really kind of Chicago, FaZe, and us, and kind of for the most part kind of showing what we can do and being like reaching the finals mostly every event and then playing at a high level. You might see that being different moving forward, just kind of as a heads up.
Why would we see that?
So without saying too much, there's stuff being made to make the playing field as fair as possible. Some of the dynamic and tools that are being used to understand what a fair playing field is are not perfect. It's online play. Like, no matter what you do, there's going to be an element of a team having an advantage. Just kind of give you guys an insight. When I competed, most of what I played on when I first started competing was online. And back then there's no such thing as dedicated servers or anything like that. So it was basically the players hosting a couple of maps and then the other team having some of their players host a couple of maps. So you basically had a dynamic where we're mostly going to be an advantage on our hosts because we get the advantage, and then they're going to be an advantage on their hosts. But now the way it's being handled is there's dedicated servers that are location in the big central hubs of cities, but the distance at which you get to the server isn't always fair, right? Like and the ping and all that stuff. So some of the teams have players that are scattered across the states. Some of the teams are all located in the same areas like ours. So it creates some discrepancies in fairness, I guess, and it's going to, especially for respawn modes, it's going to show. You can tell very much by the way some players are going to perform better online than they do on LAN. And I'm not saying that is the reason why we just lost. It's just a matter of the fact that there's a lot of frustrations that are going to come up because of that. And for us, what's most frustrating on my end is the fact that we try and practice on dedicated servers, or if anything, we give the other team host a lot because we feel like that's what's going to give us the best practice. We don't want to be in an advantage because if we're at a slight disadvantage, we feel like, okay, that might make us better. If we can win games on their maps, then we're happy, right? But yeah, it wasn't perfect. Obviously, they've made improvements. Friday night was actually, if I was part of the league, I would have been freaking out because it was honestly like it was mostly unplayable. Like you could see on the stream the hitches they had, but they made a lot of improvements through the weekend. So props to them on that. But it's still not perfect, and it's still a lot to figure out. So hopefully some improvements can be made there to make the playing field as fair as possible for the rest of the year. But if not, like you're going to see some kind of crazy stuff happen behind the scenes where some players may, like for a team like us that's all situated in the same area. I'll give an example. If we're playing in a host that's, for example, if we play on a host that's in, let's say, I don't know, whatever's fair to play an LA team, if it's more on their side of the country, it's almost more beneficial for us for have a player to go back home if he lives in that area, because at least it gives a player in our team a chance to kind of shine and go through and get the kills that he needs to get to win a map, rather than all being at a disadvantage. So we'll see what goes. It's not ideal. Again, this is not me complaining. I'm just kind of bringing up the facts so that everyone knows and understands what's out there, and hopefully everything can be done better. Again, online play is never going to be perfect, no matter what they do, no matter what they see. Even if CDL found the perfect solution to everything and had, let's say, 150 servers across the country where it's some things in the middle of everyone for every match, there's always going to be some element of unfairness because that's online play.
So just to clarify, your team being completely in Dallas, is this a concern that will always be prevalent no matter what two teams are playing, or are you specifically at a disadvantage geographically because your team is in Dallas specifically?
Well, with where the servers are set up right now, it seems like we might be at some disadvantage for most of the matches that we compete against based on where other teams are. And like we're kind of in a weird spot where like Chicago is probably the central hub in the north side. Mm-hmm. And then if you look at all the teams in the north are kind of closer to that than we are. Just kind of iterating on what's out there from an understanding. But yeah, no, we I don't know. It's weird. It's just annoying to be in a position where I really like the inside of me just wants to complain about it, but it's not the right thing to do. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Like for example, if we played Chicago in the finals, most of their players live in Texas. Most of the players live like 40 hours north of us. So that probably would have been like the fairest state or the fairest match because that's a case where we know like it's almost playing like land, right? Because you're all playing in the same area. Mm-hmm. But again, like nothing's ever going to be perfect about online play, and that's just the way it's going to go.
So now that you know this, now that you've been through this for the weekend, if it was your opinion solely, how would you play out the rest of the season, if you would at all?
I mean, we're going to play, obviously. We want to compete.
But if it was your choice, though?
Right, no. I mean, we would still compete. I think it's just for us to find ways to try and maybe change our play style or find ways to make, again, the game a little bit easier for us, knowing that maybe we're not at an advantage with the way we play normally. We're a very aggressive team, kind of like FaZe and the Huntsman, more or less. And I feel like it's one of the reasons why we've won the last event and why we are striving when it comes to respawns. Our search and destroy has improved greatly since LA, and that's one of the main strides we've been. As you guys saw this weekend, we won most of our search and destroys. And that's a big reason why I feel like our team should be winning a lot of these events, because when we scrim, our respawn is super strong. But yeah, no, we might have to figure something out on our end. How can we change things to cater to that, maybe a disadvantage or whatever it may be, to make try and level the playing field on our side so that we at least stand a chance to win these games from a consistent level standpoint.
So you won both SNDs against against Toronto, and you won the SND against Minnesota as well. But the series went to Minnesota, and this was a rematch, of course, of Los Angeles.
Yep.
Even the dedicated servers aside, take me into your observations of that matchup. Whether it was motivation for Minnesota having lost to Dallas in the championship match the last tournament, or maybe some adjustments they made. What are some of your takeaways from that matchup against Minnesota?
Yeah, no, I mean it's an interesting matchup. We match up to them in similar ways that FaZe does. We're a very aggressive team and they're a very slow team. They rely a lot on positioning while we rely on a lot of kind of micromanaging aggressive situations to try and get them out of those positions. So we kind of play into their game a little bit, which is kind of in most cases, if we get our kills, we'll win the game. But if they outslay us, then we're going to lose the games 9 times out of 10. And that's kind of what happened today is they just outslayed us in both hard points to an extent that just isn't manageable for us to win the game the way we're playing it. I think, I can't remember, I think it's like 23 or 24 kills outslay in the first hard point, and there's probably something similar in the second hard point. And when you play a game against a team that's playing slow and that's just playing for positioning, then if you allow them to get that much space on the map without killing them, then you're going to lose games. And that's just a simple matter of fact. I don't think there's for us, it's not really anything about what happened in LA. Maybe for them it was, but we're very good at treating every match as an individual kind of state. Even when we play FaZe or when we play the Huntsman, no matter what happened early in the year, it's like, this is what it is now. And we're trying to make the best of winning this match now. And whatever story is made out of the potential rematch or past matches is not on our end to deal with. Where our focus is on winning the game at hand, and that's all we're focusing on. So on that end, I wouldn't really give you much. I mean, there's nothing really to give you there. So, yeah.
Overall, big takeaways for you. Like, what are some of the things that you've identified that, you know what, well, let's work on this in our next scrims or in our next practices?
Yeah, we seem to, I mean, one of the things that happens a lot when your team plays aggressive and you don't outslay is the communication becomes a little hectic. For just kind of a small example, if I'm rushing and I'm killing 3 guys, my calls are going to be, I got him top L, or I got him here. But if everyone kind of loses their gunfight, then the communication becomes a lot more complicated, where you're calling out a lot of different positions on the map, where the players who are left alive have to kind of make sense of what is going on. So it makes things a lot more hectic and things become a lot faster in your brain. So that's one of the things I think is kind of good for us to see is what happens when we start losing these games where we're outslaying. Because we didn't lose these games by a lot of points. We lost by 30 points the first time and 60 points the second time, even though we got outslayed by a lot. Which, from my standpoint, if my team was outslaying by that much, we'd be winning games by 150 points. We'd be 100 point clubbing the other team, for lack of a better term. So it's just a matter of trying to fine tune maybe the communications and really kind of make sure that when we are in those situations, we prioritize what really needs to be kind of called out. And it's hard because, again, we don't really go through these situations very often when we practice online. That's probably the biggest takeaway is how can we manage our practice schedule and our practice regimen to match what we face when we compete in these online tournaments? Maybe it's finding a way to play on these servers or playing against these teams in ways that will emulate what we face this weekend. Maybe it's just, again, trying to maybe get our guys a little rattled up so they start communicating at an amount that's just very comparable to what we play when we play online in these events. But it's really kind of figured out how to, because exactly for me, I've been in Dallas since I think it's been a month now, maybe a little over a month. So I've been watching every single scrim they've played, and I've been in there with communications, recording games, really trying to make sense of what's going on. And just based on what they said, because I can hear the communication game, it's very different. What we played on today was not very much matching how we normally practice. So as a coach, it's my job to try and emulate that. So that's what I'm going to be working on moving forward, I would assume, is to try and really find a way to match our practice schedule or our practice environment to what we just competed on, the environment that is.
Speaking of communication, as much as you're willing to tell us, what were the players saying moments after the Minnesota match, if anything?
I mean, they were frustrated. Obviously, when you lose, you're never happy. Given the circumstances, there's a few things that was, I don't want to say too much again. I don't know exactly to what extent. I don't want to piss off the wrong people, for lack of a better term. But it's just a little aggravation, feeling a little defeated. And it's normal. You should feel that way when you lose. You don't want to be happy. I felt like they took it pretty well. But yeah, just frustrations, just kind of the typical stuff. There's nothing really crazy that happened. We're just trying to discuss what happened in game as much as we could to try and figure out what we did wrong, what we did right. And we'll when everyone's cooled down, and we'll probably take tomorrow off since it's after a tournament, and then Tuesday we'll come back in and start talking about what we did wrong, what we can improve on, and just try and make it from there and see what we can do to fix everything to make it a better environment for next time we compete.
Take me into preparing for this weekend. And what I mean by that is, me watching it as an outsider, or the viewers watching the streams as an outsider, There were definitely moments where there were the face cams for all the players, right? And some of them were AFK and some of them were eating and whatever, et cetera, right? There are many examples that people could point to in terms of just players being casual in between matches, whatever. I'm just wondering, like, did you as a coach instill any sort of routine or anything to sort of get your players in the mindset that, yeah, even though we are in a different location, even though that this is very comfortable and familiar to you, this is still a tournament. So we have to put things in place to put you into that mindset. Was there any consideration into things like that going into the weekend?
It's actually like the motivational aspect for my team is the thing I have to worry about the least. These guys love winning and they love competing. Like if anything, where I needed to come in was to really try and get these guys to practice at the same level where they want to compete in an event. For example, a few weeks back when I first moved, like we didn't know when we were going to be competing next because the events just got canceled. All the online stuff was kind of being worked on behind the scenes. So we had no idea when we were competing next. And that was probably the hardest time as a coach, is to try and motivate my players to show up every day and really be into it and not just play for the sake of playing, because that's just kind of what they do. But yeah, no, at all, dude. Like they all understand that this is tournament mode and they're all communicating and they're all kind of hyped. Even there's daily schedule from a tournament standpoint. They got up earlier today. They got some good food in them. They did what they needed to do to prime their bodies in the best position possible to be able to compete at the level that they're all capable of. So yeah, no, absolutely nothing on my end that need to be done. I'm sure maybe it's different on different teams, but my team, not at all. They're all great competitors and they all have experience, as much as like people see Ender and Shotzi new to Call of Duty or the competitive scene. Like Ender's been playing, Illy's been playing online tournaments for like 3 or 4 years now, and he loves winning. He loves competing. Same thing with Ant. He's been playing Halo Shotzi's been playing Halo for a couple of years. So all these guys know what they're doing, man. Like it's getting these guys motivated is definitely not one of my problems.
So you you joined this team, like you said, mid-season, right?
Yeah.
So when you began to prepare to coach this team, take me into that. Like, what did you look at? What were your philosophies going into? Because this is a great mix of established championship caliber players and young players. So how did you parse all of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like it's funny to say, but my role probably would have been bigger on the team if I joined at the very start. From a standpoint of Crim and Clay did a lot with these guys before I got on. So they've already been through playing 1 or 2 events. They already scrimmed a million times. They were a very strong team early in the season when everything was online. So when I came in, I took it with a grain of salt. I had to first off really learn everything about the game that they knew and try and get my knowledge back to kind of what it was before when I competed. Really kind of grow my understanding to a level where I can teach them things and show them things that they might not know already. But they've done a really good job of adapting to the meta and really understanding everything they needed to do around the map to compete at the highest level. And that's why they've been a very strong team since the start of the year. But yeah, no, for me, ever since I joined, it's been mostly about finding ways to incorporate discussions. So like, instead of being really in a position where I'm going to tell them to do this, it's more like, hey, have you guys thought about maybe trying this out? This has happened here. Have we thought about what the inclusion of this strategy could be, and so on and so forth? And just really making sure that the smaller things that you really need to compete at a highest level are there at all times, like small talk when you communicate. Like a lot of people that come from the outside think communicating is simply saying where a player is on the map when you see him. But most of the important communication is what you're going to be doing and what you're trying to accomplish when you have a certain life or a certain route to take. And that's kind of the small things that I really try to inform the players that they're doing or not doing when we practice and in tournaments. So yeah, no, it's my involvement again has not been as much as I thought it was going to be from a coaching standpoint, because I knew that I was going to be doing this role basically when the season started, but I had visa stuff to deal with. So yeah, it's really come from a point where I came in. My role has been a lot different than I thought, but again, I feel like my role is doing what it needs to do. If ever I feel like things need to change a little bit on that front and I need to come in and be a little more assertive about certain things that we're not doing right, then I'll do it. But right now it's not necessary. And again, I'll have to judge it whenever things happen to see if those things need to change or not. But right now it's doing well.
You are a longtime, successful member of this community, right? Lots of respect among Call of Duty fans, but so do Crim6 and Clay, right? For example, right. I'm just curious, like them in particular, people who have been on the scene for so many years with championships under their belts and success and pedigree. Like, how do you approach? What was their reaction to you joining the team, and also how do you approach coaching them in particular, people who, I mean, some people would argue that, do they even need coaching at this point?
Right. They were really excited about having me on, and those guys were told pretty early that there was a strong possibility that I'd be joining the team. So from a standpoint, they were excited to have me on again. It's been great working with them. The one thing that's a misconception is my involvement has not really been on an individual front, but more so on a team front. So for example, when you say I got to coach Clay or Krim, everything I say and do when we practice or so on and so forth is really about our kind of a team position on the map. If I see something specific that they did, I'll call it out, but it's never really to the point where like I'm going to sit down with them and be like, oh, you really should be doing this, 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 and that. Like they have a good understanding of what they should be doing in the game. It's more the small things and really kind of iterating what really happens when they make these decisions, because I can see the mini-map when we scrim, for example, or I can see the grander scheme positioning of the whole team. So if I see something that kind of was mismanaged or some play that they didn't really understand, or they made a call out, a communication where they thought this team spawned here and they didn't, I'll call that out and try to make them understand why that happened so that they know on their front when that situation happens again, they know what to expect. But yeah, no, it's super team driven what I'm doing. If I was earlier in the year, maybe I would have been a little different with the younger guys since I feel like they had a lot to learn. But they've been very good about the progression through the year, and they've reached, like, it's pretty impressive just from my standpoint, because I worked with a lot of young players when I competed, and I was almost like a coach with the players I competed with. And the new players that I caught on, and these guys have caught on a lot more than I thought they would be capable of given the time they've had with the game. So it's really exciting for me to see that, and it shows really kind of a strong possibility for them to really kind of contend and compete at a high level throughout their career if they can pick up games this fast. And just the small things in quality that happens is the things that they weren't accustomed with before.
So going into this weekend, even as we talk, it is a Florida-Minnesota final. Minnesota may not be as much of a surprise. Florida maybe shouldn't be as big of a surprise given that they have made a final before, but with the teams involved here, particularly Dallas and Chicago, some might see this final as a surprise. So I know you talked about it earlier, the extraneous circumstances that this league is continuing under, but how much of a shift are you anticipating? Like, how many new teams will emerge under this online format as contenders now that we're seeing this entire season go online?
Yeah, no, I mean, I expect it to be kind of, a lot of people have said that online play and LAN play isn't that different. Given the circumstances of what's been happening so far, I would say that it's going to be a pretty big change. Again, it's hard to kind of really understand what exactly is going to happen. Things may change, whatever server quality or anything like that. Like the quality of life stuff for games might change to where the fairness becomes just like LAN, and then you're like, you won't see much change. But the meta of the game is also changing. Like that's the biggest thing people are kind of forgetting, is that the more you play the game, the more things are figured out, and some people kind of get better at the game and through time, and some people kind of stagnate and get to a level where they don't improve anymore and they just stay there while everyone else kind of catches up. So that's going to be interesting to see. I would suspect things to change a lot. It's scary I'd say it's scary for all the top teams, and not scary for the teams that have nothing to lose, because for them it's just like, this is going to be an advantage for us because whatever was working on before online wasn't working. So if we go online now, we may stand a chance and win some of these matches as long as we keep improving and making the right decisions. But yeah, no, it's hard to tell, honestly. From my gut tells me it's going to change a little bit, but my job is to try and maintain my team to the highest level, and that's all I'm going to be worried about. So whatever happens, happens, I guess.
This might be an odd question, but do you think the meta would be influenced at all by online play versus LAN?
Oh, 100%. And that's kind of,
how so?
So, I mean, there's the latency makes a difference. This is from a history standpoint in Call of Duty. LAN play is typically always slower. There's a lot of things that change, and it's not only just because of connection, but just like sound, for example. When I play a LAN event, everyone's playing with these in-ears, earbuds under their headphones. There's a lot of ambient sound that you hear around. Nothing's ever perfect on the sound front, so just like sound whoring or like hearing people walk around is different. There's a lot less of that on LAN. The connection difference makes the camera and the kind of the latency things that you happen online when certain teams can kind of maneuver around a lot quicker because they can kind of pop around corners and kill people that are kind of sitting there holding their aim would be not the same on LAN, because it's a lot harder to do it on LAN. So just the pace of play in general on LAN is a lot different normally than online, just because of the sheer environment you're playing in. So that technically is going to change things just on its own, regardless of whatever connection and other elements that are kind of possible to change from a LAN to online environment. So yeah, surely the way you play the game and what you're trying to accomplish doesn't really change, but the way it's being done while it happens is going to change it a little bit. So teams may have to adapt to that. Again, like it's weird to say because all these teams scrim basically every day all week. I think most teams have one day off, so we're playing online anyways. So we practice for these LAN events, and it doesn't really change. We show up to the LAN event. We know we need to accomplish. Like, again, it's the small things in between that change, like the sound and all those things. But beyond that, we still try to accomplish the same things. So you would think that scrims online would dictate what's going to happen in an online tournament, but so far it hasn't. So it's interesting to think. I don't know exactly what that is, if it's just the servers or whatever it is may be. But yeah, we'll have to see what kind of transpires for that for the rest of the year. But I can tell you right now, from all the results that I've seen from scrims, we see a little bit, like, for example, the Huntsman stream some of their scrims and all that stuff. Like, whatever results have happened this weekend have been kind of unforeseen, in my opinion. So it's who knows what's going to happen moving forward.
You even mentioned this to me when we spoke for an article I'm writing a week ago about the importance of scrims now as we move to an online league. And there was an interview with Mox after Florida defeated Chicago, and he basically said, yeah, we scrimmed Chicago this week. We knew their tendencies. It was fresh in our minds, and that's exactly what happened during the game. And I know that, like, basically you will scrim pretty much half the league every week, right? Like there's it's inevitable that you're going to be seeing a lot of the teams, if not every team, at some point in a 2 or 3 week rotation while scrimming, etc. But like, how does that work now, in the sense that you got to get the practice against the top tier teams, but you don't want to give away too many of your secrets? Like, how do you balance that, especially now that you're moving online? It's going to be pretty much the same environment when you're scrimming.
Yeah, for the most part, we try not to scrim a team for the week prior, for example. So we didn't scrim any of the teams in their pool during this week, to try and avoid really kind of showcasing what we had planned or whatever made strategies that could be different than when we played them last. For the most part, I don't think teams are entirely worried about that. The tendencies and elements, like, again, unless I play, like, let's say for example, we probably scrimmed Minnesota this week. Not saying that made any difference. We were beating them when we were scrimming them. But from a standpoint of like understanding and really making a difference when you play them, I don't think that's very the case. Some people might say those things. It may just be a confidence thing. But on my personal level, I feel like we could have played Toronto, Minnesota, and all the teams we played this weekend this week, and I don't think it would have changed much beyond maybe like breakoffs where you start the map and what direction you go when you start a map could be a little telling. So if anything, if you repeat the same things, but mostly teams try and change those things up and try and prepare against what they feel like their team's doing. It's almost like playing poker, where you feel like a team's going to do this, but they don't end up doing it. And then that's like, you call it bluff, or you're calling the call that they made, or the raise, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's interesting to think about, but I don't think that like practicing against specific teams is really catering to helping them get better. If anything, it's just if a team's like behind in the meta and you're beating them, then you might be teaching them things that work and things they should be doing. Okay. And that's the case at any point, right? That's not just this week or the week before. Like, that's literally all the time. But at the same time, you're trying to better your craft when you scrim. So your job is to try and prove out the things you learn. And that's kind of the fact now that there's only 12 teams in the league. There's not much difference in practice to go around. So if you figure something out and people are kind of catch on to it, there's no really good way to hide it. Because you're not just going to... Sorry, go for it.
Oh, no, finish your thought. I have a question after that.
I was going to say, like I can't really, like, for example, I figure like a play call in Ramaza for a rotation that works really well, and I do it once and it worked. I'm not just going to stop doing it. I really want to prove out that it worked. So I'm probably going to try it against a few teams, and if it really does work, then they might see that and be like, click, oh yeah, that's a really thing we need to do as well. So then it's a matter of like who's going to execute it best. And that's what happens in Call of Duty games, is that the more you go through the year, the kind of the difference in meta kind of blends out to like one play style, or not one play style, but one real kind of good way to play the game. And then it's a matter of like figuring counters to that, and it's like flips on the other side of it. But for the current state, I think we're getting close to that point, but we're not quite there yet.
What do you think the next meta is going to be?
There's no specific way to say a meta per se. It's more like the nuances and how you attack certain hard points, and how you rotate to certain hills, or how you hold certain hills. Certain positions that you hold to hold a specific place might be different. And all of those things kind of change from online to LAN as well. Well, not necessarily hills, but like, for example, if I hold a corner around a camera that's really bad, and I do that 3 or 4 times in a scrim, I know I don't have to do that anymore because it doesn't work. So I'm going to try doing something else. And then if I do that, and if the other team does the same thing and catches onto it, then that's not a thing anymore. And that's more like the nuances in the meta. There's no really good way to explain a meta. I've tried to do this many times in my career, and it's like someone's like, "Oh, Ray, what's the meta right now?" I'm like, "Well, I could probably tell you how many SMGs and ARs are being used, but beyond that, there's no really good way to explain
Do
it.
you think that will change? Like, are we still in an MP5 meta? Or are we?
It's hard to tell. Again,
Yeah?
it's
Okay.
like that's something that if anything would change drastically, that might be one of the things. It's hard to kind of dictate really right now, but just based on the fact that if maybe having more ARs is going to help you if you're playing on X server and so on and so forth. So who knows? It's hard to tell again, like since it's really fresh for everyone. So we'll have to see how people adjust.
It's a 200 IQ answer. You already know. You just don't want to tell us. So that the
Maybe,
rest
I
of
don't know.
yeah, maybe. Who knows?
I don't
Let's
know if I heard
let's end on this. Tell me about your history as a coach, and particularly, let's start with when did you know you wanted to coach? Like at what point in your career did you say, I think I would like to give coaching a try?
So funny story. For those who know me before, they probably know this already, but for those who didn't, I competed for 6 years and I played with a lot of great players and I've molded a lot of great players into what they are today without being too egoistical. But I was almost like a coach, player, and manager when I competed on my teams. I was never the skillful player. I was always the player who would really dictate what should be done on the map. I was very communicative on what should be happening. And then even in practice, really kind of dictating to the players like, hey, this, and this doesn't work. Let's try this and this in our next practice. And then really kind of making sure everyone's on the same page. So it's almost like weirdly, I was kind of being a coach without being a really coach, like only a coach, I guess. But I never really thought of myself like physically doing the coaching thing specifically until I heard about the franchising. Obviously, last year, coaches started taking a bigger part. Like, for example, the E United team that Clayster was on with Brian, with Facento, Bryce. With Facento was a really strong team, and I feel like Bryce had a big involvement in that. When I saw that, that was really cool because I had discussions with them about it, and they kept talking about how much his involvement in the team was being helpful to them. So whenever the franchising thing was released, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is my chance to kind of get back in the scene possibly. I wasn't really sure at the time. I really liked my job at Sledgehammer. But whenever I got an offer and I saw the state, and then I kind of sat down with my fiance and kind of picked out what are our goals as a couple. And one of our goals is to buy a house and have a kid. So we couldn't really do that in the Bay Area. It wasn't really part of that accomplishment. It's, for those who don't know, the Bay Area is extremely expensive. So whenever I saw the opportunity to move out of there and come to Texas and work for an organization I'm familiar with NVS and the Dallas Empire, I was really excited about it. So I kind of jumped on it, and here I am.
So it was definitely equal parts enjoying the coaching, but also a life decision.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I love esports, man. I love anything competitive. I golf, I bowl, I do a bunch of stuff on the side to kind of keep my competitive juices going, even though I don't play anymore at a competitive level. But yeah, no, I just dealing with the players and being in that atmosphere at the event, like LA was like, dude, that I never thought I'd get that kind of rush again. Just being there when a team wins and screaming your ass off to the point your lungs hurt. It was so exciting. But yeah, no, I'm really happy to be back in the scene and hoping to do great things with the Dallas Empire for a long time.
I feel like this is only a part one. There's so much to unpack with you, Ray, but I know that we're pressed for time here. We really appreciate you joining us here on Coach's Corner, which is our ESPN Call of Duty League podcast, where we dive into the X's and O's of a coach and how they approach coaching their particular franchise. Maybe the next time we'll do it while playing NHL 20 or something.
There we go. If you want a beating, come my way, my guy. I'm with it.
You're always with it. I hear that. Rambo Ray joining us here on Coach's Corner. Ray, thank you very much for your time, and you got to come back.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's been awesome. And again, props to Dallas Empire and everything they're doing, man. All their sponsors up here ahead, great people. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. So thanks for having me again.
So normally this show is live every single Monday. This is a special pre-taped edition. Ray was nice enough to join us minutes after the Dallas Empire concluded their home series weekend in the Call of Duty League. But join us next Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern live here on twitch.tv/ESPN Esports for the next edition of Coach's Corner.